Welcome, everybody. This is the YouTube version of the session that we put on June 28th, where we're walking through a series of different sort of scenarios of the weekly updates that Shadowserver puts out. So this was originally done on GMT+8. This is a series of different sessions we're doing in different regions of the world. So that way people can attend during their daylight hours versus all hours and participate in the Q&A and things like that with it. What we're going to be covering today is a quick summary of what Shadowserver Foundation is all about, because lots of people keep on asking who's Shadowserver? It's just a fact that Shadowserver isn't a big marketing, commercial operation, so it keeps low key. We'll talk about it. We're going to take and review the Shadowserver latest alerts. So we're going to get into just how these alerts work, the pace of operations, and why you need to really pay attention to these Shadowserver alerts and how you can plug into it, and then how you can quickly get signed up to it. Now we have more in-depth videos on our YouTube channel that you can find out more about, how you sign up and how you leverage the different data sets and things like that from Shadowserver. All of it is a public benefit, part of the Shadowserver free services for all the different users on the internet, and parts with the Shadowserver Alliance. Then with most of the sessions, you're not going to hear the Q&A, because what we do is we'll turn off the recording for the Q&A. A lot of security questions, people want to take it offline so they can keep it confidential and things like that with it, and we respect that. And then, again, this session was originally done GMT+8 in ASEAN. Well, this is, you'll see me around since I'm in Asia a lot, doing sessions in the Asia Pacific region. For people who don't know what GMT is, 8+8 is, that's the time zone that you have Hong Kong, Singapore, Malaysia, going up into Japan, so it's kind of like, this is where you have a range of it, within this time zone. So we kind of like plus or minus back and forth, it's daylight hours. There are other sessions that we do US on the Americas side. There's sessions we do European side. There's sessions we do in parts of for Africa. So you'll see more and more with Shadowserver's YouTube channels. Now, who am I? My name is Barry Green. I've been working with Shadowserver for the past 20 years, not necessarily inside Shadowserver, but I've always been a supporter. I've been a user. Shadowserver reports have networks that I've run and designed and architected have saved my behind over and over again with getting me notified on issues going on in my network that I need to go out there and get fixed ASAP. So this is a really important part of it. And I put a little operational edge to it, since I'm one of the people who use Shadowserver dataset. Now, everything on here, this is TLP clear. For the people who don't know what TLP is, Traffic Light Protocol was adopted 15 years ago, maybe, by the security community as a way where internationally we can agree with each other how we're going to keep certain information confidential. You'll see this in vulnerability disclosures and investigations and things like that. So if it's like TLP red, small group, tight group, does the investigation or works on the vulnerability and gets the fix, and then when it's ready to go, you push it out the door, right? TLP clear like this, you can send it to anybody, right? So go to first.org. That's where we kind of like have now maintained the specification at the first.org organization, and look under TLP and you can find out more about it. Now, what is our goal here? Key goal is to help you sign up to the Shadowserver datasets. They're free. Again, Shadowserver datasets are free, and it's one of the best attack surface tools out there for free. And we'll explain why it's free, because of the support from the Shadowserver Alliance. Then we're going to help people point out to the API and the DevOps and SecOps tools. For a majority of the time I used Shadowserver, it was email reports. Now, APIs, suite, right? I can integrate it in all sorts of data sets with it, right? And then here we're going to focus on how do we use these reports to mitigate your risk, and we're going to talk through it. Now, again, part of our goal is getting more organizations to sign up. So you see here, like in ASEAN, we have a lot of IP address space covered because we have like, telcos connected and ISPs connected. That's a lot of IP address space. But what we want to get is a lot of autonomous systems, a lot of organizations, a lot of hospitals, a lot of factories, a lot of different critical infrastructure. These are infrastructure that don't have a large IP address space, but they have an autonomous system number and domain names and things like that. And we're trying to get more organizations to sign up, subscribe to it, and leverage these reports. Now, plugging into Shadowserver. Every individual here, if you're listening to this and you're not signed up to the public mailing list, sign up to the public mailing list with your personal email address. If you're a security professional, if you're a network architect, if you're somebody who maintains cloud systems, you want to sign up to this because Shadowserver, as I'll explain it a little bit, is usually leading everybody and saying like, here's the alert, here's the details, here's how you can find out more information if your network is at risk before anybody, right? It's also all this information is shared on social media. So on Twitter X, InfoSec, LinkedIn, Blue Sky, et cetera, et cetera. And then these videos like this also subscribe to the YouTube channel because we got more and more videos and we're going to have guest appearances and different people sharing how they use the data. So there's a lot of interesting and new things coming out. So let's give a quick introduction. How can Shadowserver send out free reports? Because there's an alliance of like-minded organizations that align with Shadowserver's mission. Shadowserver's mission is, and the goal, the aspiration is to have a threat-free internet. We have too much risk on the internet. There's too much cybercrime. There's too much nation-state activities. We need to reduce our risk, right? And so we have other organizations who are aligned with Shadowserver and they support as part of the Shadowserver Alliance, or the other organizations and individuals and foundations who actually contribute because they want to have a threat-free internet, all right? And they're all donating to the cause. The cause is to get you as a network organization, as a hospital, as a water plant, as a government institution to get you access to the data set so you can actually protect yourself, all right? It's a 501c3 in the United States. It's a Dutch stitching in Europe. So we got, European and US nonprofit audited, all the audit reports. And it's been like that for, 2 decades now. All the information that it gets, the idea is to get it into the hands of the people who can make impact, right? So that's what we're trying to do. It's a small team in the Shadowserver. A lot of volunteers help out. So people that we've known and worked with, like for instance, I've been a volunteer for years. I'll come in and help out. I've been a researcher and help craft new reports with the team and things like that. And 20 years, it gives a lot of trusted experience with this stuff. We got 3 key audiences. At the national level, those certified authorities, like national CSerts and different regulatory agencies who have an accountability to the citizens of their countries, right? So that's at the national level, right? So we work with basically all the national CSerts as an example. All the network owners, we're up to 9,000 right now. We want to get up to 10,000, 20,000, right? The more, the better, because we're collecting all this information now. And the only thing holding us back is people signing up and getting the data downloaded to them. That's like the key thing with that. And then lots of law enforcement work. We'll give some examples of law enforcement activity. There's a lot of trusted law enforcement activity. Now, we get core data sets. Other presentations will go into details, like what is a sinkhole? We got lots of sinkhole data. How does the scanning infrastructure work? We'll go through deep dives on stay tuned on a YouTube channel so you can find out or watch a webinar on scanning details, right? Go through and say, okay, here's our sensor data. We got a variety of different sensors. 2 of the co-leads who's leading Shadowserver, Dave Watson and Pieter. Pieter and Dave are basically at the beginning of the whole HoneyNet project, right? So we got a lot of different experience with it. We got one of the largest malware binary sandbox infrastructures on the planet. And so if you're an endpoint protection company and you're listening to this and you're not plugged into what Shadowserver does, you're missing out. This is not a commercial operations. Again, supported by the Alliance, sign into it. It's a really big leverage part. So we'll go in, there'll be future videos where we go through and take each one of these apart to break it in. But what it means when you add all these things together, all this infrastructure of what's being collected, this is a big platform. This is not just like, I'm an attack surface company and I'm scanning your network for you, looking for vulnerabilities. This is beyond that. Some of the biggest things that's really helped me in my networks in the past and is coming in and getting an alert and say, hey, give an example. I was in one company and I came in and there was like 19 computers infected with Medroot. Okay, Medroot is a nasty boot sector virus. I need to get those off. And then the bad guys could have done some lateral movement inside my company. They got through everything. Windows is patched, updated antivirus, all these protections, all these filters, right? I had everything you can think of that you put as a security professional in there, tight ship, audited, and the bad guys got through. And Shadowserver let me know because it was part of a sinkhole operation, alarm, got the computers off the network, eliminated any risk, saved me a ton of money and a ton of grief on there, right? And that's because I put in my domain name as part of my reporting infrastructure. So autonomous systems, domain names, IP addresses were the things in there. And what did that cost me? That didn't cost me anything. And there's more things we're going to be doing. Like for instance, DDoS API. You know, if you don't like DDoS, you should be talking to your DDoS a company that you're working with to protect yourself and say, are you plugged into the Shadowserver DDoS API? Because Shadowserver does a lot of DDoS sort of tracking of understanding what's going on. You know, ask the teams to do that, right? So that's part of in there. The other thing with the reporting is that you can, it's not just one report to one group. You can have multiple reports of different types and different data sets going to different teams with different APIs going to different applications. So you can have a NOC and they got a nice Grafana screen in their NOC, and then the SOC is doing an analysis engine into the data lake, and the product team is using it because they're processing data to send out to the customers, so the customers know they're infected. See, like if you're an ISP, the security team's looking to make sure all the systems are tight and locked down and secure. Each of them can pull into the proper reports and tools out there, so it's multiple reports. So it's really interesting to see how different companies set this up. But it's like one of the things that I'm running into as an operator is I'll talk to a big organization. They go like, "Oh yeah, we only have one team that can see it." And I'm going like, "Okay, let's talk. Let's break it up until you have multiple teams get the right information to it." All you need to do is just email to contact@Shadowserver. We open up a ticket, we tune it for you, so that way you can go and take action and protect your network. Now, one of the things that was a surprise a couple of months ago, VulnCheck, one of our colleagues and friends over there, VulnCheck, they're doing the startup, they're doing an analysis, and they're checking things out, and with their tool set, and saying, okay, who reports the fastest? Who gets the word out the fastest? Known exploit vulnerability. Who talks about the known exploit vulnerability the fastest? Who's the one I really need to plug into? And they went into the study and said, Shadowserver. And those of us working at Shadowserver, in one way we're surprised, in other ways we're not surprised because everybody's working hard. They're working hard because the whole team is constantly on the lookout for things with our experience. I mean, someone like me, I've been doing this for 40 years now, right? So, we got a lot of old timers, a lot of experience, a lot of hard knocks. We kind of know this vulnerability is going to be a serious one. Let's get this into the scan. Let's get this into the telemetry. Let's get this into the detection, right? So we're able to work fast with it, and we're plugged in with trusted networks. Then we have the alliance members. The alliance members go like we got one this past weekend, say, oh, hey, we saw this new amplification factor. Hey, can Shadowserver, you spin up a report on it? Yeah, we're checking that out. That's the alliance. And so these are trusted members in there because one of the things that the alliance gets to do is you have this tight interaction with Shadowserver to say, let's tune the reports like this. Let's get this new report out there. Let's go tackle this problem, right? So that's what the alliance member does, that intimate interaction with the whole Shadowserver team. We do the same thing with national CSERTs. National CSERTs say, hey, can you look out for this? Can you write up a new report script on these sort of things? And then law enforcement, you'll get some examples on law enforcement. Law enforcement trusts Shadowserver data sets that other organizations don't get, right? And then we got a whole bunch of security groups. Shadowserver is usually plugged into 4 or 5 different ongoing security investigation groups going on. And Shadowserver is leveraged because it's a tool that can actually set up some of the scanning, the sinkhole, when the takedown happens or when the investigation needs to go through a different phase, it can actually notify all the Shadowserver constituents, and there's no cost to all this. This is part of the infrastructure. Then you got security companies and vendors leverage in Shadowserver. IoT partners leverage in it, doing new reports for things like that. So there's a lot of things that go into why Shadowserver is kind of like, up here in being extremely fast and pointing out here's known exploitable vulnerabilities out there with it. So let's give some examples of that. So here's several of them that came out over the last couple of weeks, right? We'll get like 2 to 3, maybe 4 a week that happens that will put out a special, update. Here's a new report. Here's something that may be in another report, right? That we're actually scanning for with it. Now, when you sign up to the public mailing list here, you'll get something like this. You'll get like here, dear everybody. Okay, here's what's going on with the P2P infect malware. Here's as a reminder, right? It's part of the redress, right? And there's a special report on it, right? So we'll put this report on there. So let's break this down. Let's take P2P infect. So P2P infect was going after redress. It's an exposure out there. And this is a good example of exposures that go up and down. They cycle. Because what will happen is we'll go out there and say, okay, here's a risk. And then the bad guys will use it. And then, I call it the cockroach effect. You shine the light on what's going on. You start looking for it, right? And then what happens is the bad guys go, okay, rule number 1 is being an effective cyber criminal is don't get caught. So they go away, right? Now, that doesn't mean the problem's fixed, right? Because people need to patch, they need to fix, they need to put appropriate protections. And here, readers put out an advisory to say, here's what you need to do. And then what happens is the bad guys go, okay, nobody's looking now, cockroach effect. They come back out. Here's another one. And that's what Carter's Security pointed out and says, oh, they're using it again. P2P infect, botnet goes out there. It starts doing it again, right? So you get these cycles. And the problem with this is redress is this is long-term data. Shadowserver is showing that the risk is getting higher. It's not going down. So this is a concern. This is where one of these reports is important. So this is public dashboard. This is actually a cut and paste off of our public dashboard, right? So you can kind of see what's going on with it. So, okay, all right. So that's why, and here, Readers has got an advisory. Here's what you do to secure your system, all right? So this is not one of those like 0 days, nobody knows what to do. It's right there. Go to the vendor, Readers in this case, and go out there and help work and fix it, all right? And that's one of the things that Shadowserver does all the time is we go out there and we work with the vendors all the time to actually get the right information so people can take the risk and go down. Because our goal is to take this risk and have it go down, not go up. That's what we're trying to do, get it go down, right? Get the problem fixed, right? Now, in this particular case, we also have a special report. So sometimes you'll see the data in the reports. In this case, it's a special report. So we have a special report, and it's high risk, right? So we put a clarification, whether it's critical or high or medium or low or info, right? So we got some details on it and you can find out more here. And it points to the vendor activity in several of the blog posts with it. So that's one example. Now, move it. Another one, cyclical. You had problems with move it in the past. We got problems right now. As soon as it comes out with an advisory from that was found out, it was almost immediately. Shadowserver started putting, here's a scan for this CVE, and all of a sudden we put it into the detectors, and all of a sudden people start scanning for it. It was quick, right? So I guess bad guys are ready to go with it. So the details here, was part of the email in there with it, all right? The crew that found it over at Watchtower Labs. So you get over here to go to Watchtower Labs, you can get the details of what they found, how they found it, things like that. They got a little graphic with it and things like that. And it was all done responsible disclosure. This is one of the things Shadowserver loves, where you get groups work with responsible disclosure. Watchtower reached out, right? They worked with the vendor. They set up a time period. They had everything all ready to go, and then they all simultaneously pushed it out together, all right? And many times what happens is Shadowserver becomes part of that. So if you're a vendor or if you're a security researcher and you want to help it out, you can give Shadowserver a heads up and say, hey, TLP Red, this is going to happen this time period. Can you set up the scans for this? TLP Red, it stays quiet. And then when the researcher and the vendor is ready to go, Shadowserver goes out exactly the same time. And this helps get the word out to everybody, right? So this is kind of like one of the examples of that sort of stuff. And, you know, move it. There's a lot of risk out there, right? So these are this particular case, our scan can't find out whether it is vulnerable. We see it. We don't know if it's vulnerable. Now, we put this information in the information device identification report. Device identification report is super, super valuable. It's probably one of my favorite reports that Shadowserver puts out, because essentially you get this huge inventory of identifying, okay, this particular port number is attached to this with this signature, you know, because you go to a port, what's behind the port? Shadowserver will look at it and say, okay, this is what's going on with a particular device. It will profile the device so you can see what's going on your network. It's really important because today so much happens on networks. There's no way a security person can keep control. Everybody keeps on adding things. Everybody keeps on adding things. So you take this every day, Shadowserver goes like, zoop, scans your network. You pull up this report and says, okay, what are they adding now? What are they adding that's not secure? What are, you know, so this info report. So you can find, you open move it, you know, on the device and identification report, right? And you can find many other things in there. Let's shift over to a takedown. Law enforcement, right? As I mentioned, Shadowserver works a lot of law enforcement. Over the years, a lot of law enforcement activities, right? And it keeps on adding, right? This chart we have to rethink this chart because there's so much information on it. It's all compressed with the amount of activity that's been going on for the past 20 years. So in this particular case, joint law enforcement operation led by the FBI in the United States and many other organizations. Here, this is a cut and paste off of the US government, but there's a lot of different law enforcement organizations. You know, Singapore did actually the rest of the bad guy of the 9/11 S5 proxy system, right? They put an operation on it called Operational Tunnel Rat. And essentially what this was this VPN system that was set up. You loaded a VPN, a free VPN service on your system, and it had a backdoor on it. And the backdoor allowed the criminals to have their own VPN system. And this was used to go after hospitals and launch DDoS attacks and a whole bunch of telemetry control that the bad guys use, and they would rent space on it. It was, you know, it drove a lot of people nuts, you know, over the years trying to see what they can do with it. This is all taken down now, right? And so you can read through here about, you know, the presence of using it. Now, what Shadowserver was asked to do is do the sinkhole operation, right? So what goes on now is all the command and control from all the VPNs and all the software that I got stuck into is now plugged into, the sinkhole, and it goes out into the reports. So it's reported to you. Now, why is this important to you? You say, well, this is a criminal VPN. So think of this. I gave this example, when I was up in Malaysia at Minog, right? So I can be a government institution over in Malaysia. We have the football match going on in Europe right now. So at the time period this is going on, we got the football championships going on in Europe. I'm bored at work in this government office, and I got this freaking firewall blocking me. I can't get out and watch the football match in Europe. Okay, let me download this free VPN system. Now I just bypassed the firewall. And I downloaded a backdoor, right? That's not good. And so this report, when you go through and look at it, right, and its data is shared in this report here, you can go through there and find, here's the 9/11 S5 proxy. And you say, if these things are on my network, okay, let's do an investigation. Because if somebody goes out there and downloads this proxy on your network, it means they probably downloaded other things. It probably, you probably want to do a further investigation because the bad guys could have used it, right? So that's not good. And how much of it is out there? There's a lot of it out there, right? So that's one of the things to keep in mind for is there's a lot of downloads out there. Now, since this was focused on GMT+8, focused on ASEAN, here's the ASEAN chart. You can see which countries. This is public data now. This is off the dashboards. We're going to do a deep dive on other webinars where we talk through. Here's all the different ways you can use the public dashboard, right? So we'll get into that in the future one. And again, what we're doing now is Shadowserver is asked by the law enforcement organizations do the sinkhole command and control and get the reports out. And these reports are All you need to do is subscribe, and you can get these reports and many other of the law enforcement reports. Because we move over to the next operation, Operation Endgame. This was pulled together by Europol in Europe. Multiple countries, multiple law enforcement organizations, multiple security groups, right? So in this particular case, Shadowserver was one of peers. We worked with a bunch of our peers on there. And you can find the details, operation-endgame.com, right? And you can just follow the details of it. And this is not over. This was just another wave of going after, the bad guys out there. Now, part of the things that happen with the Operation Endgame work is there's a bunch of different malware families that the community, the group working together, led by Europol, was able to say, okay, we can take this down. We're taking down Smokeloader, all right? And they'll share it out there. So Shadowserver gets this data as, over a secure connection from the community, who's their host, somebody else is doing the sinkhole, and it sends it over to us, and we get it out to you, who are a subscriber, so you can find out how many people are infected with Smokeloader on your network. Now, if you did something like this, and I get the report. So here, what I did is I took one example from one organization, and I downloaded their report. This is back in June. So here in June 11, here's the events, and I kind of sanitized it to make sure nobody's embarrassed with it. And I looked for Smokeloader. And so there's a whole bunch of devices out there, who have Smokeloader. Now, when Shadowserver reports the report data, whether it's API or whether it's the download email file, it's very precise. Here is the timestamp, and the timestamp's really important. And here's the protocol. Here's the source IP. Here's the destination IP. Here's the source port. Here's the destination port. In other words, it's a group of things. And you need that because if you're going through a carrier grade NAT or you're going through a firewall, right, then you need that information so you can find out who's on the other side, right? And this works. I've been using it as an operator all the time, going through my carrier grade NAT of running a little tool and run, here's the Shadowserver log and my carrier grade NAT log, and find out, okay, it's these devices over here, and I need to go talk to them and get it cleaned up and get the malware off the system. So this is an example of what we're doing with it. Smokeloaders all over. You can see where it's around the world. Again, this is from the public data set, of what's out there, right? And then here you can see, you can take a view for ASEAN, right? Here's the ASEAN countries. Here's a view for that. Smokeloader was one of many. So System B, at the time of this recording, System BC bot infections came out, the ICE ID came out, and there'll probably be more because Operation Endgame is an ongoing operation of what's going on, led by Europol. And this is, again, an example of groups working together. So you've seen the cool information you can do with Shadowserver. So what do you start with? Okay, let's do connection. If you go to shadowserver.org and you look at the top right, it says subscribe. And we're going to ask you questions like who you are, organization, email, if you have PGP keys, right? What's your network, autonomous system numbers, CIDR blocks, domain names. It doesn't have to be perfect when you pull all this information out, because you can say, here's what I know now. Here's an update. Here's another update, right? And so you put these references in there. So you'll pop up when you say subscribe, something like this. That'll open up a ticket. So you'll have a ticket. And then we go through and do, our investigation to make sure you are who you say you are and you're authorized to do it. Maybe somebody in your organization already has a report, and then we'll plug you together. We'll do things like that, right? And it takes about 5 to 7 days to kind of work through it right now, because we get a lot of people asking for the data. That's good. All right. So now, who gets the data? Shadowserver doesn't sell any data. We just don't give data away. Shadowserver only authorizes the data go to the organization that it belongs to. In other words, a ASN that belongs to network B, the CIDR blocks that belong to network B, the DNS zones that belong to network B. B is the only one that gets that data. Network A, network C, network D don't get any of that data. So it's different from some other organizations who say, oh yeah, you come to us and you pay us money and you can get data on anybody. Shadowserver 20 years ago projected forward to what we have today, where it's going to be a really hostile environment. And just putting that data out there where the bad guys can go get it freely, we don't see it as responsible, right? So this is for 20 years, and it's one of the reasons why you get national CSIRTs and different big companies and different special law enforcements and governments kind of trust Shadowserver's, data confidentiality policy of how we send out the data, because a lot of this data is like invaluable. Go back to the example I gave where one of my networks, 19 computers infected by Mebroot. I don't want somebody to go out there and find out there are 19 computers on my network that's infected by Mebroot. That shouldn't be public information. I need to know it so I can clean it up. So that's an example of why it's that way. The only exception to this is if you're a legitimate national CSIRT. In other words, if you're a national CSIRT and you're part of FIRST and you got the FIRST qualifications, if you're Shadowserver works with all the national CSIRTs, hundreds of national CSIRTs. And so there's a lot of them out there, and they get a summary report. So they can go out there and work with their constituents, which is also you, right? So we have this intersection. This is, you can get the report from Shadowserver, and then you can sign up to a report from your national CSIRT, right? And so we work together this way. So sometimes you may get duplicate. We'll send you something and they'll send you something, right? So that's okay, because we want to help you get your remediated. What type of reports? By default, there's several different types of reports out there. By default, autonomous system, IP addresses, domain names, all right? Those are the key three things to start out with. There are more things out there, like if you're a top-level domain operator or something like that, there's more out there. But these are the key three things that we ask for that we can start up with it. And then there's a whole bunch of default reports. There's over 120 reports right now that you get automatically subscribed to. And once a quarter, we'll send you an update. Here's all the reports you could subscribe to. Here's the reports that you have been subscribed to, and you can actually interact with us and say, I don't need this one, but I need this one. Or can I have two email, one going to the SOC team, the other one going to the abuse team, right? And they need different reports because the abuse team is not interested in these, but the SOC is not interested in those, so you can divide up the report. So work with Shadowserver. We can tune this sort of stuff. We can also give you some nice little graphics. Like internally, we can see the number of risk events that we are tracking on a particular network. API is the way to go, though. You start out with the email reports, you get the APIs going, and then what happens is a lot of organizations then say, turn off the email. We just use the API, right? And that's a normal flow these days. You start with the email, get the APIs integrated into like your Grafana and Splunk and whatever tool you're plugged into, and then you turn off the email report and stuff. And all this is documented in our public materials, so you can get everything in the wiki over on GitHub, so you can download it and you can take a look with it. And we even are plugging in more of the open source tools. Intel MQ. If you're looking for a tool to try out first, Intel MQ is open source. You can pull your NIST data in there. You can pull a bunch of zone data in there, passive DNS data, and Shadowserver data all together in one place that was designed for incident response investigations, right? So that's where it's part of the originally a funded project from Europe called the Incident Handle and Automation Project. It's alive, it's funded, check them out, and we'll have a video that we're going to be posting to talk about, how you take Intel MQ and integrate Shadowserver into it. Other tools we do is on the dashboard, we have known exploitable vulnerabilities. This list is what we see as vulnerabilities that are alive. In other words, people are actually trying to break into it. And so when you got a big list of things to work on, which ones do you work on first? Start with the known exploitable vulnerabilities, because people are knocking on these doors trying to use these to get in. Get them fixed, right? And there's drawdowns in here for other like the CISA CAV. We also have a mode called Delta mode, where instead of getting everything every day, you get once a week, you get the full summary, and then if there's a difference, like new risk that gets added, you get those per day, right? So that's the Delta mode. But when you get through all this, the key thing to remember, if Shadowserver sees it, the bad guy has the capability of seeing it. It doesn't necessarily mean they figured it out yet. And the goal here is to get the report for Shadowserver so you can actually fix it before the bad guy sees it. But if Shadowserver is outside in, if Shadowserver sees it, the bad guys can see it. right? And this is a way that you can actually reduce a lot of risk of your organization from ransomware and APT and DDoS and a whole bunch of other things out there. Now, this is live data. This is, off the dashboard. You can look at things like this, right? So you take Ozzy and you take, okay, our sinkhole data. Now, again, remember, sinkhole is infected systems and compromised devices knocking on the door of our telemetry tools and say they're infected, they're at risk. So these are devices inside. So you go in here, you say, okay, Indonesia, 126,000 devices in Indonesia who are infected and going out there, and who knows what's going on. They can be inside government institutions and data centers and things like that. This is kind of like the bad guys are in the network with this, right? This is what it's in there. Then you got like scans. Scans shows risk out there. Okay, look at that. What put around. Now it's Singapore, 1.2 million areas of risk. This isn't just like, oh, there's open SSL. No, this is like there's risk. This is identified as risk, right, to the system. So this isn't just like open ports. This is like there's some sort of risk on the systems with it, right? All right. So this is on your network, right? And then we also track like DDoS amplification, and then the operational technology. This is like OT systems, which are critical infrastructure that should never be on the internet. And then you've got websites compromised, right? So there's lots of interesting things with it. So when you get through with this, if you're in like an exec watching this, question you need to do is go to your team and says, how are you using Shadowserver? I mean, it doesn't cost us, and we can use open source tools. Can you take Shadowserver and plug it into Grafana? Grafana is open source, it's free. Shadowserver is free. How can we leverage this to better reduce our risk? Because Shadowserver is one of the ones getting the reports out quickest. Speed, right? And then you go around to your security vendors. Is okay, are you part of the Shadowserver Alliance? Why not? Why aren't you supporting this effort? This is a team at Shadowserver is out there trying to mitigate the risk for everyone. Are you part of that? Right? So ask your vendors, ask your security vendors that question, right? And then ask your telcos and cloud operators and ISPs. How are you using Shadowserver data? Everybody can actually access in some way, shape, or form with it. So at this point, the question, since this is recording on YouTube and people are going to probably watch this on YouTube, ask your questions in YouTube. You can send a question to contacts or info@Shadowserver. You can sign up to the public mailing list, right? So again, one of the key things in here is we want to get people tuned in. We put these alerts out 2 to 3 a week minimal of here's like a new issue going on. Unfortunately, there's just way too much security activity going on out there. It's really, stressing to the community. What Shadowserver is trying to do is provide you with the tools out there. Some of the tools out there, and this is something coming down the road, already U.S. government, if you're a government network, you have to comply with CISA's KEV list of known exploitable vulnerability. We make it easy for you there. Stay tuned. You're probably going to see a European one. You're probably going to see an Australian one. They are coming, where governments are going to say, here's a risk. It's being exploited. Get it fixed now, or there will be consequences, right? Shadowserver is going to make it easier for you out there. Again, immediate. I'll also put these links into the comments section in the YouTube channel so you can actually cut and paste off of there. And again, these slides are all going to be linked into it. So again, in summary, Shadowserver, the vast majority of organizations out there, you don't need to worry about, who's paying for it. You just sign up to Shadowserver, start using it, and mitigate your risk. Minimize your risk. Get the risk to go away, right? These reports are delivered via email and API, right? And you can integrate it with all your different tools. And then organizations, who have only used Shadowserver. I've been, the only tool I could afford in some organizations was Shadowserver. And I was able to actually get 80% of my risk eliminated, right? That was a huge savings, right? And then, I'll have commercial vendors come knock on my door and say, hey, you want to buy this? I go like, you don't even match what Shadowserver can do. And I didn't have to pay for Shadowserver. I just had to pay for my 2 engineers who went out there and fixed all the problems. So thank you again for watching this. Stay tuned for more of the webinars that we're going to be putting out. And, sign up to our YouTube channel.